Mr. Nordstrom, you told our staff that you read the ARB's unclassified report and recommendations. Do you think that implementing these recommendations is important to ensure the safety and security of our foreign service?
Absolutely. I had an opportunity to review that along with the other two committee reports. I think taken all together, they're fairly comprehensive and reasonable.
And I guess a diplomat like you probably feels very disheartened when you read in the paper, say you're overseas, and Congress has cut this budget for embassy security, and Congress has been cheap, on the cheap, providing protection to our personnel. You know, in order to make security possible at our missions and our embassies throughout the world, it's one recommendation in this report that attempts to grapple with these issues and err on the side of increased attention to prioritization and the fuller support for people and facilities engaged in working in high-risk, high-threat areas. The solution requires a more serious and sustained commitment from Congress to support State Department needs, which in total constitute a small percentage both of the full national budget and that spent for national security. But it's exactly what we in Congress have failed to do in the past. Let's look at our record. House Republicans voted to cut the administration's request for embassy security funding by $128 million, and that was in fiscal year 2011. In fiscal year 2012, they cut the request by even more, providing $331 million less than requested. You know, our Republican counterparts have just said that these cuts are based on their priorities and choices. And when asked whether he voted to cut diplomatic security by over $300 million on CNN, Representative Chaffetz responded, absolutely. Look, we have to make priorities and choices in this country. But these cuts have impacts, serious impacts. And I want you to know that my priorities, including funding these recommendations, which will save lives. You know, the ARB, Mr. Nordstrom, just to be clear, you provided information to the ARB, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And Mr. Hicks, is it true that you also provided information?
The ARB interviewed,
ARB?
yes.
You know, it was led by Ambassador Pickering and Admiral Mullen, who happens to be the former chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. In its investigation, the review board interviewed more than 100 people, reviewed thousands of pages of documents, and viewed hours of videotapes. The board made 29 recommendations to improve security systems and procedures to prevent future deadly attacks. And a key finding made by the board related to availability of funding, specifically for temporary facilities in high-risk, high-threat environments. And the board stated, the department should develop minimum security standards for occupancy of temporary facilities in high-risk, high-threat environments and seek greater flexibility for the use of Bureau of Overseas Buildings Operations sources of funding so that they can be rapidly made available for security upgrades at such facilities. And it is important to note that the facility in Benghazi was designated as a temporary facility. Mr. Nordstrom, do you agree with the board's review?
That was actually one of the specific things that I talked with the board. My concern is there is no such thing when you look at the FAM or the OSPB standards for a temporary facility. And so by its very nature...
So they developed the recommendation.
After the fact.
How about you, Mr. Hicks? Do you agree with the recommendation?
I'm not a security expert. I'm a diplomat. I'm an economic officer. But I'm support every improvement that can possibly be made to improve our security overseas, including increasing the training of our personnel.
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. I would also thank the gentleman from Missouri, but ask, were you here on October 10th when the person who had those requests for additional security said money was not a factor, Charlene Lamb? Do you remember her?
I can't remember if I was at this.
Well, Mr. Nordstrom, you were on that panel. Do you remember what she said?
Yes, she said that resources was not an issue, and I think I would also point to the ARB report, if I'm not mistaken, that they talked to our chief financial officer with DS, who also said that resources were not an issue. So.
Mr. Chairman, the ARB says resources were an issue.
Well, I guess the question that I have about the ARB, and again, it's not what the ARB has, is what it doesn't have, and that it stops short of the very people that need to be asked those questions, and that's the Undersecretary of Management and above. Those are perfect questions that he needs to
And I'm sure that if we implement some of the recommendations, it will help us prevent a future attack.
And I appreciate that. And what I would say is that in the earlier hearing in October 10th, the one thing we did discover is, yes, this facility was not able to take the blows even of a small bomb that had gone off earlier. Mr. Nordstrom testified to the fact that this consulate, temporary consulate, had been attacked twice, and they'd breached the wall. So there was an awful lot of recognition that it was an insufficient facility, and I think that's ARB, no ARB. That's something that's well in the committee's record, but I thank you for bringing it out.
Thank you.
We now go to the gentleman